Good afternoon, everyone. Such a pleasure being here. We've just had a lot of hand showing, so can we do a little exercise? How many of you think you're really, really lucky? Please put your hands up. Wow, that's wonderful. How many of you feel you're not as lucky? Okay, that's a large number. So let's do this exercise. Let's all of us take a breath. Wow, all of you can breathe, my goodness. You're so lucky. Congratulations. Take it from someone who has stared at death not once, but twice. So let me tell you my story. For the longest time ever, I felt, what was the purpose of my life? Why was I born? Life was only about hardships. But one day I sat down and I looked hard at my life. And I saw there were three things that I wanted to share with people. And those are the three precious life lessons I want to share with you today. The first time I asked myself this question was, why was I born? When I was in middle school, and my middle school teacher wrote out my destiny in red ink on my notebook. The words were, "This girl is wood sitting on wood. She's so dull, she will never be able to learn the English language." I was educated in a foreign country, so my English was really weak. When my parents translated it to me, my preteen heart broke. I cried, I sobbed, but somewhere I found the courage to make a decision. Perhaps one day I would grow up to become a writer, and I will show that teacher. The second time I asked myself that question was when the love of my life fell dead on a beautiful summer morning. I was torn apart by grief. How could I, an unsure, underconfident young woman, be able to handle this frightening world? I was left with no will to live. But just then, I saw two small children clutching onto my skirts for support. To make my journey tougher, I was struck with breast cancer. With no option left, I simply decided to battle this monster. And I went through all the challenges of single parenting, of financial problems, relationship breakdowns, and all the problems, all the stress that came with changing my label from poor widow to capable professional, because I was at that time working in a largely male-dominated steel industry. 17 years later, when I was all set to heave a sigh of relief and look back at a life bravely lived, I thought it was brave, breast cancer struck me again. What is the purpose of my life? I asked the universe. And at that time, I heard a crystal clear voice inside me saying, you know what? Your life does have a purpose. And soon you will discover what that is. By that time, I had taken faith in Nichiren Buddhism. The Lotus Sutra is all about winning mystically. So I decided to fight life with a lot of attitude and some humor. So there came a time, but before that, the first decision I made was that I would stay alive. The second, that I would do so with attitude and humor. And at that time, I commanded death to come to me by appointment only. There came a time when all my hair fell out. I had no eyelashes, no eyebrows. And yet I celebrated life. One day, I remember, between my chemotherapy sessions, I called up a friend of mine and I said, you know what, let's go out for coffee. She spoke in a very depressed voice into the phone and said, no, I have a very bad cough, I'm not well at all. And you, how have you been? I said, oh, nothing, just cancer, let's go out and have fun. She was so horrified that she disconnected. You know, it was fun to see how people reacted to me. You know, some of the reactions I would like to share with you. Those reactions were, it was nice knowing you. What are you so sorry about? It's your karma catching up on you, all your past sins that are coming back. What can you do? Ma'am, be happy you are not young anymore. At least you know how you are going. One very well-intentioned woman, she came up to me and said in a very concerned way, oh my God, did they chop you off? And she broke into a relieved smile only after I told her my breasts were intact. A gentleman came up to me, shook my hands warmly and said, ma'am, it was wonderful knowing you. Bon voyage. I said, hold on, where am I going? I'm going to outlive you, sir. So this made me realize that there are so many myths, so much ignorance, so many superstitions surrounding cancer. And I had chosen joy, but in my country, there was so much of ignorance about it. I realized I wanted to do something. I looked around in India for books to cheer myself. I found none. So on the chemotherapy table, I simply wrote one. To Cancer with Love, My Journey of Joy, zoomed on not only to become a bestseller, but India's first joyous book on cancer. You can see a lady in a private nursing home reading that. I followed that up with its graphic novel version to keep pace with our deadline-driven, stressful, dwindling readership, short attention spans time. So these are some images from it, and these are some superstitions about karma, fate. The central character is me. So I followed this up with a coloring workbook and a journal to engage the minds of the stricken and their caregivers during the long hours of waiting. So, you know, I realized I am an intelligent person. I need my mind to be engaged. So these are some of the pages. You know, where do you carry your baggage? Learn to forgive. Switch from victim to victor mode. And one day, looking back, I realized that this wood sitting on wood had actually managed to write 9 books, most of them bestsellers, all of them in English. Thank you. My latest book has been Manisha Koirala's Healed, How Cancer Gave Me a New Life. And this book turned out to be zoomed on to become a bestseller within 2 weeks of its launch. And with this book, I realized that finally the time has come to make survivor voices mainstream. The third lesson I would like to share with you. Soon after the release of my books, a lady came up to me. Of course, she told me how much courage my book was giving her. There's another woman who came to me and said, my husband has just died. How can I continue living in this frightening world? Another single mother came up to me and said, how do I face the challenges of single parenting all alone? To my surprise, I realized I could dip into the pool of my limitless compassion and of experienced pain And I could give them something that only one human can give another, the gift of hope. I realized that I should do something to change the society's attitude. I wanted to do my little bit. I realized that shame is at the root cause that prevents women from talking about the breast and its illness. People were the conservatives were quite shocked when I stood up on stage, no hair, no eyebrows, and I admitted to having cancer, and I also admitted to going to live long after that. And I talked about a subject as taboo as the breast. I urged women to drop that shame and to seek medical options boldly and selfishly. I have so many stories around them. My driver, whose wife had worked in my house several years back, came to me and accused me of making his virtuous wife shameless. I said, "What have I done?" And he said, "She is all set to show her woman thing to a doctor." Now, I was horrified, but it brought out the social activist in me. I made him sit down along with his friends and gave him a precious piece of education. We did take his wife to a doctor, and yes, it did turn out to be cancer. An elderly woman from a remote area sought me out to share with me how her husband had thrown her out of his home because she had got infected by cancer. And sure enough, he had brought in a younger woman to look after him. This made me realize that lack of education has created such a huge problem in our country regarding the attitude towards cancer. So I counseled mass media and society to stop depicting women, Indian woman, the perfect, ideal Indian woman, as a self-sacrificing, suffering goddess. The problem with doing that is that when women buy into this patriarchal death trap, they completely ignore themselves. I exhorted women to make their health their own top priority, without guilt. You know what happens with most Indian women? When they get any funny feeling in their body, they neglect it and they postpone going to the doctor until the entire family's routines, demands, schedules have been met. And by the time they do take themselves to a doctor, often it becomes too late. Ironically, breast and cervical cancer are curable if detected in the early stages. I urged men to make the health of the women in their lives their top priority and actually redefine what it means to become real men. Many stricken women reached out to me to tell me that I had finally given them a voice. They felt finally they were being heard. There are many others who came up with their own stories, which again, I continue compiling in my book. It was at this juncture that I realized that I was able to reach out to all these suffering, afflicted, stricken people through a deep pool of experienced pain. And I realized at that time that perhaps it was for this juncture that my life had been preparing me. And I made a decision. I would live, and now I would not live only for myself. I would live for others. That decision felt like a chick coming out of her eggshell, or like the microcosm of my limited human self, fusing with the macrocosm of the universe. In a flash, I understood the purpose of my life. It was frightening as it was empowering. Imagine the very power that has created the fathomless oceans, the endless skies, the soaring mountains, had also decided to place one of me on this earth, because I, and only I alone, could fulfill the purpose for which I was created. May I invite all of you to set out on your own thrilling journey of discovery? Would you like to transform all your obstacles, all your hardships into your life purpose? Thank you so much.